Welcome to the Three Questions webcast series. I'm Wayne Baxter, Executive Director with One Capital Management. At One Capital Management, we develop and implement strategies that enable our client to grow, protect, and ultimately distribute their wealth. And we do that by offering investment wealth management services. Thank you for taking time to check us out today. I really appreciate it. My clients are often referred to as cross-border clients. Why is that? Well, it's because they're either U.S. or Canadian residents who invest in U.S. and or Canadian dollar denominated securities like stocks, bonds, and ETFs. Our process for advising clients includes a very in-depth discovery and diagnostic analysis of their wealth management goals and objectives. And for anyone looking to relocate from the U.S. to Canada, that analysis will be a review of their Canadian immigration strategy. On this webcast, we'll be reviewing the 3 questions U.S. citizens should ask before considering a move to Canada. Joining me is Catherine Sas. Catherine is a Vancouver, British Columbia-based Canadian immigration attorney with Sas Ing Barristers and Solicitors. And I can say this, I've been very impressed with Catherine's expertise, her knowledge, and her understanding of the Canadian immigration system. And if you're ever considering immigrating to Canada, I would say you this, Catherine can be an excellent resource. Hello, Catherine. Thank you for taking time to join us today.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
For sure. Looking forward to having a great discussion today about more cross-border discussions related with immigration. And I'll tell you this, it's more often than not, since relocating here to the U.S., there have been several occasions where I've been asked by my American friends and associates on behalf of themselves and for their friends about the process for immigrating to Canada. Now, often these questions coincide with a U.S. federal election, but however, we realize there's more reasons than just the outcome of a federal election that can compel an American to consider relocating from the United States to Canada. For example, it could be something related to wanting to be closer to a family member, friends, or loved ones, or it could even be, employment related. So there's lots of reasons to talk about this. And I think it would be a great opportunity for us to go over really the top 3 questions a U.S. citizen should be asking before considering a move to Canada. So, Catherine, I'd like to start off with probably, I would think would be the most obvious first question is, do I qualify to immigrate to Canada? What are the requirements for an American citizen to be accepted as an immigrant to Canada?
Well, I think that's an excellent first question, and it's really significant and important to determine that from the outset. If I could identify what I would call a common misconception with my American clientele or people who contact me from the United States, is that it's easy, that they can just come on over here, buy property, retire, settle down, and it's close, so it's got to be easy. It's not easy. You need to qualify just like anybody else does. 30 years ago, there was a retiree category. There is no retiree category. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you have the work experience, the education, the qualifications that are going to satisfy one of the various programs. Another common request that I get are from business people who say, okay, well, I've got a successful business here in the United States. I'd like to be able to qualify, come to Canada. How can I do that? It may be that we can establish a business presence here and even get temporary work permits, but obtaining permanent residence can be far more challenging than that. So it really is important. One of the things I really liked when you gave your opening, Wayne, is you talked about developing an employment or an investment strategy. You need to have an immigration strategy. It's not just as simple as saying, I want to do this. There are different levels of immigration. So predominantly people are coming in what's called the economic spectrum. But when you talked about being closer to a family member, it depends upon whether that family member is able to sponsor you. Spouses can sponsor each other. Children maybe can, maybe can't. So it really is important to take a look at what are the programs that your circumstances will fit into to be able to achieve what your immigration goals are.
So it just makes me think, again, I will tell you, sometimes these conversations happen rather emotionally, and a person says, you know, I don't like the way the recent election worked out. I want to move to Canada. You know, that desire to want to move because of that is not going to be applicable. And they have to be able to demonstrate, to your point, they have the ability, have the expertise, have the education, probably have the financial capability of supporting themselves before they can even begin to even really seriously consider it.
Well, as your northern neighbors, we watch your the politicization in the United States with great interest. And I can tell you, I've been doing this for over 30 years now, and every single time that there's an election, it doesn't matter who gets in, there's a mass exodus to be able to leave. And the phone rings off the hook for 2 or 3 or 6 months. And then people realize, oh, this is a lot more difficult than I thought, or they examine what the tax consequences are for coming to Canada. There are just a lot of factors when you do your homework to understand what the implications are, that a lot of people say, you know what, I'm going to stay put where I am. There are also a lot of people that say Canada is a kinder, gentler, safer world right now, and this is where I would like to be able to settle. One of the comments that I heard, I would say 18, 24 months ago, that I had never heard, is there are people that want to come where the environment is kinder, where it's they're not at risk of fires or floods or tornadoes, and they perceive Canada as being a more friendly climate, climatically, to be able to settle down. So there are all sorts of motivations, and that's a really important question that I think people should ask themselves at the outset. What is your impetus for taking this step?
Right, and I think you brought up a good point about the planning ahead. So that perfectly segues into our second question, which would be, how can I prepare to immigrate to Canada? And we're going to look at this from an immigration law perspective. You know, you brought up a really important point. You know, when someone comes to me with that discussion, you know, I remember one time, and this is somebody I actually introduced to you, we had a discussion about this, and we had a list of 10 different things that they needed to consider, you know, and yeah, this idea of moving from the United States to Canada. But, you know, so obviously there's all the things that you would think about. There is, you know, tax planning, estate planning, investing, as real estate. There's a myriad of different issues to factor in and think about before you take a move. But from an immigration law perspective, what can somebody do to prepare themselves to be able to immigrate to Canada?
So that raises two different questions. One, what can I do to prepare to qualify to immigrate to Canada, versus what do I do to prepare after I have qualified? And I'm not going to spend as much time on the second one. I'm going to focus more of my effort on what do I do to prepare to be able to qualify. And a lot of Americans are perplexed at the stringence of what is required to be able to meet the criteria of their program. When it comes to family immigration, it's not as stringent, because you've got a family relationship that is deserving of sponsorship, and so we provide evidence that support the nature of that relationship. But if you're coming as an economic immigrant, you're coming under the express entry category, you're coming under the self-employed category, you're coming under the startup visa category, and you need to be able to demonstrate that you meet those criteria. Pretty much all three of those programs require language tests. I have university professors from Columbia and Harvard, and when I tell them you need to take a language test to confirm your English language proficiency, their eyes go, you know, wide open and say, you're joking. And I go, no, you actually have to do that. You have to have your educational credentials evaluated. So even if you've got a PhD for Harvard or Yale, you have to have them assessed by a Canadian educational facility to determine that they are equivalent to Canadian credentials. You need to have letters of reference confirming your work experience. And it's not simple enough to say, I, Wayne Smith, have been working as a financial advisor for this company for the past 10 years. It needs to meet criteria as set out by the Canadian National Occupational Full Classification. And so I just had a consultation with a young man today before this who's in the United States, and he wants to come here. And I said, well, I can't tell you whether you're going to qualify until you give me these 3 or 4 things. I can give you my best estimate that you probably will, but if you want certainty, and I can assure you that everybody wants certainty, then you have to take these steps up front to put your immigration advisor in the best position to be able to say, yes, I think this is going to fly, or no, I think you need to pull up your socks. We often have people take language tests more than once. I send out reference material to my clients routinely saying, here's a program that I partnered with another entity, and they teach people how to improve their language scores. You've got to invest some time if this is something that you really want to do. So I would say for Americans, a lot of time they are not comfortable with making the effort to achieve the result that they think that they want. Having said that, I have lots of clients who do. They say that this is really important to them. I can think of one couple right now, and they've been living in Victoria, or they've had a seasonal residence in Victoria for a number of years, and they wanted to be able to settle here on a permanent basis. And he's a very, very successful business person. But I went, you know, there really isn't a good business program in Canada right now. How about if we take a look at your wife? And your wife she's an artist. She's a very good artist. She wasn't a high income earning artist. And so we needed to change that reality to be able to reflect that she was reporting income on her tax return such that it would support an application for them. And they finally arrived in Canada in early May. So it really is important to develop a strategy, and then it requires a focused effort to follow through on that strategy.
You know, I guess that kind of segues perfectly into the third question, which is how long does it take to immigrate to Canada? So I think you have to look at this from the context of, you know, the preparation time. So if, you know, let's just say midterm elections are coming up here in November, you know, and if the typical happens, you know, we're going to have a discussion probably sometime there shortly afterwards of people coming up to me and saying, you know, that's it, I'm moving to Canada, or I want to move to Canada. You know, realistically speaking, that the preparation time before you can actually seriously consider, what would you think that would be? If you want to give an estimate, what would you say?
I would say a minimum of 2 months and possibly 2 to 4 months. You know, if you're going to get a language test done, that's going to take probably 4 to 6 weeks to get those results once you get an appointment. If you have to have an educational credential assessment done, that again takes 3-4 weeks. Letters of reference, it depends how long we're going back and does the company still exist. There are all sorts of different factors for consideration. People who come in the business program, they may or may not be up to date on all their tax filings or their financial statements, and we're going to need that evidence before I can determine they actually qualify. I've got a gentleman that I've been working with for 6 months now who's coming up under the self-employed category, but his financials are not in order. So we're working with his accountant to make sure that we can demonstrate that he meets the criteria of the program. If you don't meet the criteria of the program, there's no point in us doing anything. So sometimes there's a significant evaluation period. The processing times vary based upon the type of the application that is being made. And it also varies depending upon the reality of the day. Processing times in Canada right now are nothing short of abysmal. I have people that applied for permanent residence in 2018, and they're just getting approved now. When COVID hit, it shut everything down. In the self-employed category, I would say 5 years ago, I was having applications processed in 6 to 9 months. Now I tell people be prepared for 3 to 4 years. But that opens up another question, or another issue, and that is the difference between permanent immigration and temporary immigration. Lots of times we can have people come into Canada on work permits or study permits, which allow their family members to accompany them, and then we can simultaneously apply for permanent residence while they're already here in Canada. And having a presence in Canada, either as a student or as a worker, tends to give more points and facilitates your application. And most of our immigration selection is a points-based model these days.
And on that last note, so let's just say that they get approved on a temporary entry for work purposes. So spouse A is working. Does the second spouse have the ability to work as well, or are they not allowed to?
Generally, yes, they are. There are classifications of immigration strata, and the vast majority of them are what we call skilled immigrants, and any skilled immigrant is able to bring their spouse, and their dependent minor children can go to school up until high school. After high school, they would have to qualify for university. The same principle applies if a spouse wants to go to university. So if you're going to college or university, your spouse is eligible for an open spousal work permit. So sometimes, depending upon what the goals of the family are, we have one spouse go to school so the business person's spouse can have an open spousal work permit and do whatever it is they want to do for their business that they otherwise might not be able to do. So, as I said, the key word is strategy. If this is what you want to do, then we have to figure out a strategy that is tailored to your family's best, to your family's needs.
Well, you know, a lot of planning is always, was it like one of my favorite lines, a friend of mine many years said to me, you know, those who fail to plan to fail.
Good saying.
And with that being the case, when, in all seriousness, should someone really start to begin, you know, the application process? If they have an end goal in mind, what point are you starting to really get, you know, the rubber hit the road and start to really, like, how far in advance, if you have it in your mind that you want to be in Canada as a Canadian resident by X date, we'll say, just for fun here, summer 2023, when would be, how far in advance of that would you suggest they seriously start the process?
Honestly, I would say summer of 2022. You may find that you can come here sooner. I may be able to tell you, well, you've got options to bring your family here sooner. But if you're trying to come as a permanent resident, as I told you, in the self-employed category, be prepared for 3 or 4 years. That doesn't mean to say we can't possibly get you here on a work permit, but in certain sectors, we can. There's a lovely provision called the intra-company transferee work permit. I love bringing people into Canada on that basis. So if you're a business person in the US and you're prepared to establish operations, then we can bring you and your family here now, and we can sort out the dust of getting you permanent residence after. But if you have to have that permanent resident status in your hand before you come, then you've got to need to figure out what those options are. In express entry, I'm telling people you should plan at least 2 years.
All right. Okay, I think the next obvious question, I know we've gone through the top 3 and a little bit more. You know, for anyone who will listen to our webcast today or watch our webcast today, who is actually thinking seriously about relocating to Canada, and they're obviously recognizing your expertise and ability, you know, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, call the office, go to the internet, send an email. You know, we're very, very accessible through our website, and we set up appointments very, very quickly. We start with an initial consultation. You tell us what you're looking to accomplish. We're going to tell you whether or not that's feasible and the best way to achieve that.
Well, we're going to help a little bit with this because we're going to actually put all of your contact information right on the screen here. So anyone who is watching, they can actually use that as a way of calling or emailing you or going through your website. Catherine, I really want to thank you for taking time for us today. I suspect that we're going to probably have future webcasts because this topic, obviously, with immigration is always evolving. So again, I want to thank you for today. You've been a great guest, and looking forward to keeping in touch.
Thank you so much, Wayne. I really appreciate you inviting me, and I do look forward to us working together again.
For sure. That's Catherine Sas. She's with Sas Ing Barristers and Solicitors in beautiful Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I look forward to bringing you the 3 Questions webcasts, and I hope you find them educational and informative. Please consider liking this video and subscribing to our YouTube channel. And to receive a notification as to when our latest webcast has been posted, please click on the notifications bell. Lastly, to schedule an online Zoom consultation with me to discuss your wealth management needs, please click on the link in the description box below, www.onecapital.com, Meet with Wayne. Thank you, and we'll see you soon.